So welcome. My name is Professor Jason Frasca of the Feliciano Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I teach the entrepreneurship courses, innovation, marketing, 3D printing. I'm also co-director of our Innovation Research Lab, the Mix Lab. And I've been a part of the pitch competition all but 1 year, our very first year. And so I've seen a lot of student teams go from idea to winning the competition in just a few short months. It's been really fascinating to see the evolution of the teams presenting and pitching, and maybe why they've won or not won. I've had the good fortune of being in the judges' room for most every pitch competition to understand their thinking. You know, why were they choosing the winners that they chose? What was driving them to make that decision? What impressed them? What didn't? What fell short? What could some teams have done a little bit better? And so this presentation is a combination of you know, what I've learned teaching our entrepreneurship courses, what I've observed in the competition, and watching our students thrive along the way. So why a pitch? Well, the goal of your pitch is to engage people. It's to get them excited and fired up about the idea that you're so excited about, right? You wouldn't be getting involved in the pitch competition or any pitch competition, a pitch competition, if you were not excited about the problem you were solving, about the possibility of building, you know, a business that could sustain you, your livelihood, and your partners and maybe employees, right? So you see this great potential, and therefore you've got a lot of energy and excitement for it. You need to communicate that, right? You've got to get people excited and engaged. So that's the very first place to start. The next part of the pitch is that you don't want to give too much information while you're grabbing that interest. You want to, there's this delicate balance between getting people excited and not going overboard and providing too much detail. And you're probably all saying to yourself, well, look at your very busy slide, Jason. How could you say that? Well, there's a little bit of a difference, right, between a pitch and a presentation. So today, this is a presentation. The idea here is to inform you, right, to provide you with some information that you can take away. I'm creating an artifact that can be used later that you could reference in the future. So there's more detail on here in this presentation than I would have if I was pitching these ideas. It would be much less text. And we'll cover that a little bit more as we go. So the idea here is to get people excited and persuade them to get excited about your idea. So who are we persuading? Who are we trying to get excited? Well, it's the judges. It's the judges that are going to be making the determination and the decision of who wins the awards of money. And this year's pitch presentation, pitch competition is unique in that we don't have defined prizes. In the past, it would be first place prize would be an X dollar amount, then second and third. This year, it's a prize pool. So we have $30,000 that could be doled out evenly across 6 teams, or maybe just 2 teams win. So it's a different approach this year to the prizes, but your goal in your pitch is still to persuade, right? And persuade the judges that you have uncovered some great opportunity that they believe you can build. And so while we don't know who the judges are yet, once they're announced, I would encourage you to do a little research on them, figure out who they are. What are their backgrounds? You know, can you connect with them in some way during your pitch? So, you know, making that personal connection, understanding their point of view. Are they coming from an academic point of view? Are they coming from industry? So any bit of knowledge that you can acquire before the pitch about who is making the decision for the outcome would be to your benefit. So next point I want to make is consider your pitch like a first date. The goal of a first date is to get to a second date, right? So we don't necessarily need to give. Is someone have a question? No? Okay. So the idea here is to get to the next date, right? To have another conversation with the judges or the partners or the investors, whomever you're pitching to. So we want to get them super excited on your first date, which means we're not giving away everything right up front. We're whetting the appetite, enticing them, and we want to get them to talk to us the next go around. That's where you can reveal the specific details behind whatever venture you're creating, right? That's where you can get into the nitty gritty. You want to provide a problem and solution in the competition that gets them to want to talk to you and learn more about you and what you're doing. Because in the end, there's a saying in the startup world is investors invest in jockeys, not horses. And what that means is investors are investing in the person. They're investing in the team. They're investing in the people that they believe can build and execute and deliver on the problem they've identified as an opportunity. It's not so much the idea. It's not so much that opportunity. They know the opportunity will change over time. They know you can pivot, but what they're doing is they're investing in people they believe can execute. So it's really important. So you want to get the judges to envision and see you building an executable business. They want to make sure that the money they're investing, even if it's not their own and they're awarding prizes in a pitch competition, in the end, it's an investment, right? And they want to make sure that that money is going to be well utilized. They want to give it to the people they believe will do the most with it, more so than the best idea. And so you want to make sure that you can communicate to them that you've done a lot of hard work to begin building something. And building is really important. 10 years ago, people could win competitions like this or receive investment for ideas. In 2021, that's definitely not happening. Nobody is going to win the competition on an idea alone. It's about demonstrating that you've built something, at least started to build something that can be replicated and scaled. So you want to make sure that you can demonstrate that hard work in these pitch competitions. You want to prove there's a viable market that exists. And the way you do that is by showing and sharing the research that you've done. And research can include market research, certainly, but best kind of research is boots on the ground, talking to people and finding out and confirming that what you believe is a want and need is in fact a want and a need. And so you can demonstrate that in a number of ways. The first way to prove you have a viable market that exists is that you have revenue, right? Because there's no better demonstration of a want and a need than a transaction of money for one for the other, right? So if you can demonstrate people are willing to turn over their hard-earned money in exchange for the solution that you're providing them with, right? That is obviously the greatest evidence that there's a viable market. Other ways to prove the market before revenue is an email newsletter where you have signups. It's an engaged social media account, not just posting and there being no interaction, but actually people are signing up. There's engagement in the comments. People are sharing your posts, right? So that would be a viable market. And the last one would be proof of interviews, proof of talking to people to validate those ideas and showing some data behind what you've learned. What are the insights around the hypotheses of the problem that you're trying to solve and demonstrating if in fact you are solving them for them. So in the end, they're looking for teams, they're looking for people that have the fortitude and determination to see their vision through. That's who wins pitch competitions. And I've seen that before, like ideas less fully developed, not as far along in terms of the building phases, but the people clearly demonstrated the fortitude, determination, and desire to build something great have won over the people that are much further along in their development of their project, but just don't have that. They have, not that they don't have it, they didn't demonstrate it well in the pitch competition, that they have that fortitude, strength, and desire. So how do you convince them? Well, judges are going to evaluate your team, your pitch, on a number of levels. One, how well do you articulate what the future looks like with your solution in it? What's the problem you're solving? Is it a problem worth solving? Is it a big problem that has a great market opportunity behind it? Did you do the research to determine how much of a market opportunity exists, right? And we're talking about, real numbers, data, going beyond the Google search and just scanning the first page. Because they're probably doing that while you're presenting anyway, right? They're looking up that problem, getting a quick glance at what that research might look like. You've got to go deeper. That's your job, to uncover that opportunity. Is it clear and validated? Have you built an MVP? So an MVP, if you're not familiar with the term, is a minimum viable product. It's the most basic form of your solution that you have created. It could be something physical, a physical prototype that you've made out of some material, 3D printed. It could be software where you have developed a working application or even a working prototype. And if you're not a coder, there's plenty of great tools today that didn't exist just 2 years ago, and they're called no-code tools. So if you can drag and drop elements, you can build software in 2021. You don't need to have a coding background, a software background to build. So I would encourage you, if you have some form of software that you'd like to build, to Google no code or no code software, and you'll come up with a plethora of tools that exist now, and more coming on the market every day. So have you built something functioning? Have you built something that works? Maybe it's a website. That's fine. Have you built it, right? Does it look good? You want to show that you're capable of building the solution. You may not have all of the tools today, but you have at least had the gumption and the determination to figure it out, at least in some capacity. Obviously, buyers, users, a large social media presence will all help convince judges, and also demonstrating that you're willing to dedicate the time to build and grow the solution, right? It's not just about winning the competition. It's what are you going to do after the competition? So you need to get the judges excited. You want to get them fired up. You want to get them on your side. And you need to do that by being memorable. And you need to stand out in the crowd, right? There's going to be a multitude of other presenters, whether it's this pitch competition. Angel investors probably review 100 startups before they invest in one. VCs, probably look at 500 to 1,000 before they invest, right? It's a smaller pool. And so the competition is fierce, whatever it is that you're doing. And as we've seen in the pandemic, entrepreneurs are exploding, right? The number of new ventures have exploded with people having the opportunity to explore some desires and dreams. And so now more than ever, you need to figure out how to stand out among your peers. And that can start very easily with energy and excitement. So how are you going to do all this in 5 minutes? Well, it starts with a story, right? You have to get people's attention. Human beings connect with stories. Stories are relatable. Stories are all about emotion, right? Think about the stories that you enjoy, whether they be books, songs, movies, television shows, right? They're all stories of some kind. And so stories work because our brain actually activates and processes stories at a biological level, right? Much more so than just hearing words spoken. And so what we're doing why stories work is we're interpreting the feelings that are being communicated. When Raymond picked up an object, when I say that, we can all envision Raymond picking up an object, right? Our brain is firing that off and creating that picture in our mind. So you want to paint pictures, you want to paint a story of how your solution to the problem you've identified is going to work in the world. So you want to storify your entire presentation, ideally. Good stories all have the same components. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? You start with a villain. A villain in this case is the problem, right? As entrepreneurs, at the heart of the matter, we're all problem solvers, right? Every entrepreneurial endeavor at its core is solving a problem. And so that's the villain in your story, in your pitch. And your hero is the solution to the problem, whatever that may be. It can be humans, it can be software, it could be physical products. but you want to put those heroes up on pedestals and demonstrate that they can save the day. Your business plan is your strategy for conquering the villain, if you will. And business plan, I use that word very loosely. In our program, we use the business model canvas. More traditional methods are longer, more narrative business plans. It really doesn't matter. Either one is going to provide you with that structure and the backbone on how you're going to conquer the villain. And while you're not going to include your business plan in your story or your pitch, it's going to inform and guide, and that is where your story is going to come from. And then finally, the end is, what does the future look like? What does the future look like with your solution in it? And how is the world a better place? A bit more on stories. Your story, how do you contextify your story with this beginning, middle, and end will be around perhaps a personal story of how and why you came across this problem and why it's important to you to solve it, right? Maybe it's got nothing to do with you personally. It's just an area of interest. Maybe you're on somebody else's team and it's their story. You can create the story. It doesn't have to be a personal experience. You can write a story that crafts and communicates these points. And there's nothing wrong with that. How can you turn your pitch into a spy novel or thriller, right? And get people hooked and excited. There's no rules here. There's a tremendous amount of latitude, which I think is actually the challenge, right? There's so much latitude in the way we approach communicating our ideas and thoughts that it can be a little bit challenging. I have some resources for you at the end on stories, so don't worry about that. In the end, you want to focus on emotion. You want to grab and keep and get people's attention, because it's very easy for the audience to nod off, right, and just jump on their phone or start multitasking, especially in this virtual environment, right? Because people can't necessarily see what it is that you're doing. So some tips to connect with the audience: lead with dialogue, ask thought-provoking questions that relate directly to the problem that you're solving. Make something up. It should be believable, embellish, don't lie, but get people, hooked, pull them in. Appeal to the emotion, to your senses: sight, touch, taste, feel, and smell. Watch other past pitch competitions, both Montclair State University's pitch competitions and others. You'll learn a lot by watching who did things well, who could have improved, what shortcomings did they have, what do you want to avoid, right? What did judges really connect with? And so there are so many pitch competitions that have been recorded and shared on the internet that there's just no reason not to do a little research ahead of time to understand what works and what doesn't. It's nice to anchor stories to people we know. It makes them more relatable. It makes it, it allows the brain to paint a picture that we can envision, but it's not required. Fiction and nonfiction work equally well, and use a lot of verbs, right? Make sure the words that you choose are impactful as well. All right, so I started off with energy and excitement, right? And it's so important. If you're not fired up, if you're not excited to be presenting, I assure you, no judge will be excited about awarding you a win at the end. That is absolutely a common theme across all of the winners of the pitch competition that I've observed. They have all been exuberant. They have all been fired up. And that dynamic enthusiasm came through in all of their presentations. So it's quite an easy way, really, to create differentiation, especially in this virtual environment, because people tend to have, Zoom drains our energy, right? And to have low energy in virtual environments, it makes sense. Nobody would blame anybody, right? It's kind of wears on you. So it's a very easy way to differentiate and get fired up and communicate your passion for what you're doing. Because if you're not fired up and passionate, I assure you no one else is going to be. And the way to be fired up and passionate is to be confident in what it is you're going to say. And that only comes with practice. Practice, practice, practice. I tell my startup teams that I advise for the pitch competition, if you to do an excellent job, you need to practice it 100 times. That's the minimum number to deliver an outstanding presentation. Very few follow that advice. The ones that do, it is obvious. They're flawless from beginning to end, and their energy shows, their confidence is there. It all comes with the preparation. Trust at a glance. I can't overstate trust at a glance. Think to yourself about when you go, when you're on the internet and you come to an old website that's been ignored, is using old technology and standards, the color palette is off-putting, and it just, the design really makes you scratch your head and say, I'm not really sure this is a trustworthy website. I'm not sure I have confidence to give them my email address, download something from their site, or transact with them, right? Turn over money in exchange for something. It's that same trust at a glance that judges will have about your presentation. If it doesn't look great, and I know this one is very vanilla, again, because I'm just delivering information to you, right? I'm not trying to convince you of anything, but I assure you the judges are being influenced by your design skills as well. If you don't have the skills, go to Fiverr and hire somebody for 20 bucks to build you a great deck. There's tons of wonderful templates out there if you just do a little bit of legwork beyond what comes with the software. It doesn't matter if it's Keynote or PowerPoint or Google Slides. You can build a good looking website if you put a little effort into it. It will go a very long way. It's such an easy way to differentiate yourself, which is putting a little time and effort into the design, the look and the feel, and exuding trust. So some best practices for what your presentation should and should not do. Lots of images, charts, and graphs. They communicate information much easier to consume from someone watching and listening than words, especially when, if you're pitching, really want to listen to who you are, right? Who's pitching. I don't want to read a lot of information. And so your images can help to communicate the points that you're trying to make. Data, graphs, tables, right? You want a consistent design across the deck, the same fonts, 2 or 3 colors, make sure they're properly sized. Headers are larger than inline font. The fonts should complement each other. All the same practices you would use to build a website should apply to your deck. There's absolutely no difference. None at all. Just go back to this for a second. The point here, the last point I just wanted to touch upon, which is if you have 3 people on a team and each one is taking 3 slides for a 9-slide deck, it's going to probably look a little fractured. You should generally have one person do the design and control the design of the presentation so it has a consistent look and feel throughout the entire presentation. So some common mistakes: too much information on a slide, too wordy, not enough images, your fonts are too small. Don't limit yourself to a number of slides, because there's no time limit that you can spend on a slide, right? So you can move through some slides faster than others. So don't worry about the number of slides, and use great images, right? Take a little time. You would not put clip art on your Instagram profile or your Facebook page. Don't do it in your presentation either, right? Treat your slides like a social media post. And I say this to my students a lot. You put way more time and energy into each Instagram post than you do into how you're presenting your information in class. Why is that, right? And there should be really no difference. That same pride, that same aesthetic should come through. You don't want to read your presentation. You should know it inside and out. You should know the points you want to communicate. And whatever's coming up on the screen isn't for you. It's for the viewers to help support what it is that you're trying to impart your pitch upon. 1 word per slide is just fine and quite effective. And the speed in which you go through it, right, it's quite comfortable to move through, right? Everybody can read this. 1 word per slide is effective. We're accustomed to seeing fast, interactions between slides in television shows and movies all the time, music videos, whatever it might be. And so you can use those tools in your pitch as well. Just don't make it every, your entire deck shouldn't be performed in that way. It might come across a little bit odd, but you control the speed and cadence of the way you want to communicate the slides to your audience. So change it up. It gets them engaged, right? It keeps them on their toes. It breaks the pattern. It keeps them thinking. You don't want to lull anybody to sleep. So some typical pitch elements that should be included. What's the problem, right? Why should the audience care? Why should the judges care about the problem you've identified to pursue? What are the statistics and data that support your claims that this is the right problem to follow? Who's your market and how big is it? Ideally, you're focusing on a niche, right? A niche within a niche. You only need 1,000 true fans. You only need 100 true fans to make a business work. If you're trying to be for everybody, you're for nobody. And so focusing on a very hyper-specific targeted market is critical to demonstrating that you understand the market that you're trying to enter and the opportunity that really exists. If you are too broad, it'll be clear that you haven't done the work. No company started covering all markets and all aspects, right? It started very small, very niche for a very particular set of people. And all businesses grow out from there. And it's counterintuitive, right? Well, everybody can use this. There's no way everybody could use anything except for water, water, clothing, and shelter, right? Those few things. But even those things are going to appeal to different groups of people, right? In different ways and at different levels, depending upon where they are in the world and what their needs are. So we can't be for everybody. Who are your competitors? You should do some competitive research. You should know what the landscape looks like. Again, that's a social proof to a judge that you've done your homework. Why are you a better option than your competitors? What's your point of differentiation? What's your competitive advantage? How is your solution different? What approach are you taking that resolves the issue in a better way? All right, so tell us enough details to get us excited and get to that second date. A few more elements that should be in your pitch. What's your revenue model? How are you making money? So often overlooked, especially by students. I got a great idea, but I'm not sure how to monetize this. You need to demonstrate how you're going to monetize this, right? You need to spend some time to demonstrate that at least have some ideas on how you might make money. They may all turn out to be wrong. That's okay. But at least you've done some legwork to think it through and develop some strategies. What's your product demo? Seeing is believing, right? This goes back to the MVP, the minimum viable product. Can you show us how the product might work? Can you show us how the website might serve the needs of the group of your market opportunity? Give us a demonstration of your app. There's so many wonderful tools to do that. You can incorporate a short video, or each slide could be a new screen of the software that you've created. What's your go-to-market strategy? Just like no product can be for everybody, social media is not a go-to-market strategy. Social media is a required channel that you're going to connect with your end users. There's just no other way to do it today unless you have a huge budget to do it on television and radio, right? But that would not make sense. It's not a really smart way to market, especially for a new small startup. What is the specific social media channel that your user lives and why? And how are you going to get them, keep them, and grow them? How are you going to get their attention? How are you going to get them excited? And how are you going to convert them into buyers? All right. You're better off focusing on one specific social media channel and doing an amazing job than doing a so-so job across 3 channels or 4 channels. You're going to have much greater success. So communicate that. What's your high-level plan for the 12 months to 5 years? This doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be overly detailed, but just the fact that you're thinking about some milestones that you want to achieve, some goals and thresholds you want to cross, so that you know that you're marching towards success, that you've thought about goals and what success might look like, will endear the judges to you. Demonstrate the traction. What are your sales, social media followers, email newsletter signups? Traction is one of the harder elements for a new startup, right? It's going to take a lot of work and effort. It means you've got to get out of the building. You've got to get out from behind your desk, away from your computer, and talk to people. You're going to have to market. You're going to have to sell to get traction and to demonstrate that. But it's a social proof of hustle. Demonstrating how many people you've spoken with, using data, right? I've spoken to 100 people, 68% believe that this is a problem worth solving. What's your ask? Like, what is your plan for the money? To say to the judges, when I win the $20,000 today, or if I win the $20,000 today, here's what I'm going to do with it, right? Here's my plan for the money. You've thought about it. You've got some idea of how you would use that money, and tell them you're going to win that pitch competition, right? Play that psychological game, impart it in their mind that you've already won, and demonstrate to them that you've thought about what you might do with it. All right, I'm going to move a little faster in this part. This is more of a resource to provide to you, which is this book called Get Backed. It's a really good book. It focuses on how to structure a pitch, how to construct your slides, what are the elements that should be on your slides. It doesn't use story. It's a bit more straightforward, but it does a really good job, and I'm going to give you some examples of some slides of demonstrating how you want to construct your slides to communicate all these points we've been covering. The order of the slides that Get Backed uses, which I subscribe to, I think they do a nice job. Overview of your project. What's the opportunity? How big is that opportunity? What's the problem you're solving? The solution, your traction that you've demonstrated, size of the customer or the market, the target market, who they are, how you're going to reach them, the competition, how you're going to make money, who your team is, and then the use of funds. So I just spoke about all of these elements. This is the order that they recommend. It would be fine. I'm just going to cover a couple of the slides here that they talk about, and then this will be a resource and artifact that I can share with all of you at the end in the chat that you're welcome to use. So here's a cover slide, right? It's all these three examples of cover slides are simple, they're clear, and they're all communicating the value proposition, right? The image is helping to communicate something in some way, and it doesn't say a whole lot. This is an opportunity. Before you begin your pitch, that cover slide is going to sit on the screen for a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes before you begin your pitch. Take advantage of that, right? Use that cover slide as a means to start communicating the value proposition. Here's an example of a team slide. Again, you should treat this as an Instagram post. It's really interesting how team slides are often overlooked, and they end up looking something like this. And I implore you to avoid this at all costs. I'm really excited to say that 3 of the 4 members of this team slide are in this presentation right now, and I'm sure they can all appreciate why you wouldn't want to present your team slide in such a boring way. So make it exciting, pump yourselves up, and demonstrate your enthusiasm in every touch point, including the design and who and what you are in your team slide. The overview, that's your elevator pitch, right? It's your value proposition. It's going to, it's critical to clearly articulate the value that you're creating. Have some passion and swagger, as Get Back to saying here, right? Demonstrate it. What is this all about? Make it super clear. Should be short, pithy, direct. There should be no wasted words in your value proposition. What's the opportunity? What's the size of it? If you're in the world, how does that opportunity change, right? Using visuals. There, you see these 3 examples here, all using great visuals to demonstrate the market opportunity. So demonstrate your knowledge, right? This is an opportunity to demonstrate how much you have researched this problem. You know, what is the problem that you're solving? It's critical for you to articulate that to your audience. It's critical for them to understand exactly what it is that you're taking on. So be specific. Be specific about your solution. You know, what is it? This Get Back has a little point here. It says, if you learn nothing from this book, remember this: never use bullet points for your solution slide. And the reason they're saying that is there's not a lot of solutions. You're crafting one hyper-specific solution, right? Everything else that falls underneath is not necessarily important for the pitch. Communicate exactly and succinctly how you're going to solve the problem. We've talked about traction a few times. You can communicate it in some visual ways. If you don't have traction, what can you do to create social proof that you've done some work, you're on your way to building something, and you have a handle on what it is? Share some experiments that you've run, right? What tests have you done to determine this opportunity exists? Have you done a Google ad, right, where you've got a certain number of clicks? Have you had a landing page, a one-page landing page where you can demonstrate traffic with Google Analytics, that people are going to this page and maybe signing up for your newsletter? If you've done a number of interviews, great. Show us the insight, the data from those interviews. It's not enough to say I interviewed 100 people. What did you learn when you interviewed those 100 people? Share some quotes from those interviews, right? To demonstrate, to prove that you're on the right track. The customer, who the target customer is and how big is the market is something that judges are going to be looking for. If they're not familiar with the market opportunity already, right? They want to know that you've done the research and you know how big it is, but they also want to know that there's an opportunity for return on investment, right? They want to know that there's some business that could be built here where whomever is investing, whether it be through pitch competition dollars or an angel investment or so forth, that there's going to be a return. If you don't know your competition, really it's a sign of laziness. You've got to know who the competitors are in the field in which you're tackling. And the reason why you need to know is that you need to understand how you can stand out. What are their weaknesses? It's an opportunity for you to plug in a gap that exists. And there's a number of ways you could do this. Keyword research by way of search engine optimization. You can scrape websites and download and analyze language and intent from comments on social media websites. You could do it, old school, just, searching and understanding the marketplace, right? And creating SWOTs and things of this nature, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. But the bottom line is you need to do that legwork to demonstrate that you know what's happening in your space. And that is your opportunity to communicate to the judges how you can be better. Lots of green arrows pointing to this box here. How will you make money? Not so much worried about your 5-year income statement projection. I think that's kind of old school and an exercise in futility. But you do need to demonstrate that you have some financial literacy and you have a sense of your P&L, right? It's going to cost you approximately this. You're going to charge approximately that, and you're going to make X in return, right? So you demonstrate your markup is strong enough to absorb competition, price fluctuation, shipping, marketing, and you'll still be generating a strong enough revenue. So do some research. All of these questions, right? All of these little elements, you can search, you could do Google search on any of them to learn a little bit more and get some insight. The financials, again, the projections, I think this particular slide's a little bit more advanced than our particular pitch competition. If you're meeting with an angel investor, they're going to want to know what your acquisition cost is, right? And if you have an income statement or cash flow, what your burn rate is, meaning how much time you have left based on your cash before you need an infusion of cash to stay going. Running out of cash is the #1 reason startups go under. So if you're raising a round, a more comprehensive financial analysis would be prudent. For a pitch competition, I'm not sure that it's entirely necessary. Again, at the end, demonstrating how you're going to use the funds. This one's on the left. This is more specific. The one on the right is a little bit more general, and I think it would be just fine. Look, we have some marketing campaigns we want to run. We've got to get some office space, right? We need to do some in-person demos, and we need to get to conferences to shake hands. Like, hey, someone, you've thought about it, right? You've thought deeply about how you might use some of that money. Again, here's an example of a more detailed slide, and this is coming from the book, Get Backed. And that's why I think it is a good resource if you're interested in seeing examples, more examples. So in the end, you want to make every word count, written or spoken. Nothing should be wasted. If you've practiced 100 times, you'll be completely in sync with your presentation and you won't ramble off in a direction, right? I would highly encourage you to avoid going off of script. If your presentation is your script, stick to it. The objective of your presentation is to your pitch is to answer questions. You don't want judges to ask clarification questions at the end. That means you didn't do a good enough job communicating all the elements we just reviewed. You want them asking questions about possibility. You want them asking you questions about, what if we did this together, right? Or what if you followed this path? Have you considered this, right? Get past the clarification so that you can have a meaningful back and forth during the Q&A. It's an opportunity. It's an additional opportunity for you to communicate your platform. Don't waste it on rehashing points of clarification. And look, you may be asked questions that you just simply don't know the answer to, and that's okay. Just say, I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to look into it, right? If you watch cooking shows often, the judges will criticize the food that's been created, right? And the chef, and the response from the chef is generally, thank you, right? So could have been a little bit more salt in here. It's not seasoned well enough. Thank you, chef, right? Like, great. I acknowledge that you have a point of view here with slightly different perspective. You're imparting your, something I may have overlooked or missed. Got it, right? There doesn't have to be a dialogue. You don't have to go back and forth. Just accept it so that you can continue, hopefully getting to some more meaningful Q&A with the rest of the judges. Sorry, I just lost my spot there. If there's a sensitive question being asked, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm happy to answer that question privately, right? There's nothing wrong with, if you feel you're divulging something, a term of art, a trade secret, right? Or something a little bit more personal and private, just ask for a conversation on the side, and everybody would respect that. I've seen pitch competitions lost in the Q&A, right? Being defensive, defending against your idea when there's pushback and not accepting. I absolutely have seen, I can recall one vividly that lost on stage, lost $50,000 just because they were defensive about the questions around their project. So to recap, don't try to be complete, try to make sense, be clear, clarify, use as many graphics instead of words as you possibly can. Be captivating, use stories, have a lot of energy, make sure your design is professional, Instagram worthy, if you will. Again, use lots of images, the antithesis of this presentation, which was very wordy, lots of arrows, and not pleasant to look at. Again, I just recap the elements here for you in your takeaway as an artifact of what points you should be covering in your pitch. And here are also 2 additional resources on storytelling, I think, that are really helpful in helping you to craft a compelling story. Again, I'm going to share this at the end of the presentation so that you'll have this. And then last but not least, your close, right? You want to go out on a high note. You want to go out, you want to be memorable, right? You want the judges to instantly remember you when they're comparing your presentation to the others. And the best way to do that is to be visually appealing, well-spoken, well-practiced, but also closed with a great slide. So it should be something like a climax, right? After all, this has been about dating. So Alan didn't like that. That was my close. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has, if there are any.
Sorry, did you say you're going to share all this with like the entire?
I am. I'm going to put it in the chat, and you can, and then also you can share it, Liz, with the announcement, you know, of the video and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
I have one question, Jason.
Go ahead, Jamil.
Can you go over like an example of, like, you were talking about how some people made websites, etc., through coding. Could you go over like a resource somebody in the pitch competition could use to get to that, like make?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is the no-code tools I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. So the one that I think is most popular in the classes is a website called Glide. And the idea here is Glide, and there's several like Glide. The idea is, if you can make a spreadsheet, you can make software. So basically, if you have data in columns and rows, right, you can serve that data up through a software interface based on either clicking on things or entering information queries into fields. And so it's quite fast. You could build something in a couple of hours that really looks pretty darn good. Yeah. And there's a number of tools like Glide.
So did some of the previous pitch competition winners, did they use Glide, or would this be like, you know, is this something like I could do by myself, or do you recommend me doing that, like if I wanted to enter the pitch competition?
I do recommend you doing it. It is not something that's been done in the past because it's so new. So this is literally no-code tools did not exist 18 months ago. This semester is only the second semester I've incorporated no-code software tools into the curriculum because it just didn't exist before. There are some tools out there like say Airtable, which have adopted the language of no-code tools, right? I'm not sure if it's a no-code tool or not, but there's many software platforms that now categorize themselves as no-code because it's a hot, search term.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's something that you could do really easily.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
Say for the pitch competition, you're thinking about doing a website along with, like he was saying, like a no code or application. Do you recommend submitting the no code or the application, or do you just recommend just submitting the website and then later on in the future present the website, or excuse me, the application?
So I think I would include the software under the category of MVP in the application. So the pitch application asks you if you have an MVP, and you could link to your no-code software application that you've created in that space when applying. And then I would use it in your pitch as a means to demonstrate what you've built.
Thank you.
And you did it last semester, right, Ananda? What tools did you use? What no-code tool did your team
we
use?
used Glide.
You used Glide, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else? All right, well, listen, I popped the presentation, the link to today's presentation in the chat. If you're interested, feel free to copy that. I'm certainly available at any time. I'll put my email address in there as well. If anybody has any questions, want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about either the pitch competition or preparing a pitch deck for whatever reason.
Hey, Jason, it's Dennis.
Hi, Dennis. Great to see you.
I can't tell you how many memories your presentation brought back on how we refined the pitch competition over the years. But I'll tell you what you just did, I think is just incredibly powerful and a really good tool for first time entrepreneurs who are pitching to really work on that pitch to make it so powerful, which we know all of our winners, that's exactly what we did. And their presentations were just incredibly persuasive.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Dennis. And of course, I'm drawing on all that experience that, the past pitch competitions that we've worked on together. And it's really fascinating when you look back and think of what was the common thread between the winners.
Yeah.
I think it was practice and enthusiasm and energy. I think that was the two primary things. Some of them did amazing theatrics, if you will, from dropping things on stages to creating, runways for models, right, and things of this nature.
Right.
But in the end, it wasn't those points that differentiated them. It was their energy, passion, enthusiasm, and I think knowledge for the area in which they were trying to disrupt. Yeah, thank you. Alan, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. Again, I'm available to anybody at any time. Feel free to reach out.